There is a morning somewhere in your future where an older version of you sits down with a cup of coffee and checks a bank balance. That morning is coming for everyone watching this. The only thing still undecided is how it feels. Maybe you check that number with quiet confidence, knowing you're fine. Or maybe you check it with a knot in your stomach, already doing the math on what you'll have to skip. And here's the part almost nobody tells you. That feeling is not decided on that morning. It's being decided right now, by what you do with your money this year and the one after it. When you finally retire, you are going to land on one of 5 wealth levels. And these are not vague ranges or moods. They are 5 distinct, measurable levels, each one a completely different version of the rest of your life. One of them is your current trajectory. You probably can't name which one yet. The math already can. And by the end of this video, so will you. Now, you might assume the level you land on simply comes down to how much you earn. It mostly doesn't, and I can show you why. I know 2 men, Dave and Mike, who spent 3 decades together on the same factory floor in a small Ohio town. Their paychecks were nearly identical, and neither one ever cracked $70,000 a year. Yet today, Dave checks his balance with that knot in his stomach, living entirely off a single Social Security deposit, while Mike just paid cash for a lake cabin with money that will outlast him. 2 men, 1 job, opposite retirements. If income alone decided this, that gap could not exist. So if your entire retirement plan is some version of just earn more, the next 40 minutes are going to be uncomfortable and genuinely useful. So here's what I'm going to do for you. I'll walk you through all 5 wealth levels Americans actually retire into, drawn straight from Federal Reserve data and current 2026 numbers. You'll see what each level looks like from the inside, the precise dollar figures that define it, and the specific habits that move a person up the staircase or quietly trap them at the bottom. Most of all, you'll be able to work out which level you are headed for right now, while there is still time to change the answer. Before we get to level 1, you need the map. Most people measure their retirement readiness with the wrong number. They look at income. They think a person earning $120,000 must be heading for a great retirement, and a person earning $50,000 must be heading for a rough one. That assumption is wrong often enough to be dangerous. Income is what flows through your hands. It tells you almost nothing about what stays. The honest measure is net worth. Net worth is everything you own: your retirement accounts, your home equity, your investments, your cash, minus everything you owe. It is the number that is actually sitting there waiting for you on the day the paychecks stop. And when you sort American retirees by net worth, a very clear staircase appears. The data comes from the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances, the most comprehensive study of household wealth in the country. The most recent full edition was collected in 2022, and we're looking at the figures for households headed by someone in their mid-60s, the people standing right at the doorway of retirement. When you line them up, they fall into 5 distinct levels, 5 different versions of what the rest of your life can look like. And here is the first uncomfortable fact. Surveys in 2026 show the typical American believes they need around $1.46 million to retire comfortably. That's the number people carry around in their heads. But the median retirement savings for households aged 55 to 64, the ones about to walk through the door, sits at roughly $185,000. There is a canyon between what people think they need and what people actually have. Most of that canyon is invisible because nobody talks about it out loud. We're going to talk about it out loud, so let's start at the bottom and climb. Level 1. Level 1 is the level I'd call the Social Security cliff. This is the bottom quarter of retirees. In hard numbers, we're talking about a household net worth below roughly $70,000. And to be honest, for many people inside this level, the real number is much closer to 0. The Federal Reserve's data, combined with other recent surveys, suggests that more than a quarter of American adults have nothing meaningfully saved for retirement at all. Not a little, effectively nothing. Here's what life on level 1 actually looks like. There is no investment portfolio quietly generating income in the background. There is no cushion. The entire retirement is built on one thing, and that one thing is the Social Security check. In 2026, after the cost of living adjustment, the average retired worker's benefit is about $2,071 a month. Sit with that figure for a second because it has to do an enormous amount of work. That's around $24,800 a year, and it is not a starting point that gets supplemented by savings. For a level 1 retiree, it is the whole thing. Rent or property tax, groceries, the electric bill, the phone bill, the car, the insurance, every prescription, every birthday gift for every grandchild, all of it has to fit inside roughly $2,000 a month. Now picture a man named Ron. Ron is 71. He worked his whole life, mostly in retail and warehouse jobs. Never made a fortune, but never expected to. He lives in a modest one-bedroom apartment, and on the first of the month, his Social Security deposit lands, and within about a week, most of it is already spoken for. When the transmission on his 15-year-old car needed work last winter, there was no account to pull from. He put it on a credit card. He is still paying interest on that repair today, and the interest quietly makes next month a little tighter than this month. Ron is not living in official poverty. By the government's definition, his income clears the poverty line, but he is living in something economists call precarity, where there is no daylight between income and expenses, and any surprise becomes a crisis. A dental problem, a jump in his rent, a new pair of glasses. Each one forces a genuine choice between necessities, and 2026 added a quiet twist that makes level 1 even harder. Yes, Social Security gave retirees a raise this year, 2.8%. That sounds like help, but the standard Medicare Part B premium also jumped, climbing to about $203 a month, an increase of nearly 10%. Because that premium comes straight out of the Social Security check before it ever reaches the bank, a large slice of the raise vanished before Ron ever saw it. The headline said his income went up by around $56. The reality landing in his account was closer to $38. For someone with no other money, the difference between the headline and the reality is the difference between a slightly easier month and the same hard month as before. So how does a person end up on level 1? Almost never through one big mistake. It's a sequence of small, understandable delays. The most powerful one is simply never starting. Time in the market is the single strongest force in all of retirement, and level 1 is built mostly out of lost time. A person who sets aside $200 a month starting at age 25 will retire with dramatically more than a person who saves twice that starting at 45, because the early dollars get decades to compound and the late dollars do not. The 20s feel like the decade where retirement can wait. They are actually the decade that mattered most. The second path onto level 1 is cashing out. When people change jobs, a surprising share of them empty their old retirement account instead of rolling it over. The cash in hand feels real and useful. The long-term cost is invisible, so it doesn't feel like anything at all. But a young worker who cashes out $15,000 doesn't just lose $15,000. After the early withdrawal penalty and the taxes, they pocket maybe 10, and they quietly erase what that money would have become over 30-plus years of growth, which could have been $250,000 by retirement. One decision made on a Tuesday that nobody ever sees the full price of. If you recognize yourself anywhere near this level, I want to be very direct with you, because fatalism is the real enemy here. Level 1 is the hardest level to climb out of, but the math still moves in your favor the moment you start. Someone with nothing saved at 50, who begins investing $500 a month at a reasonable return, can build well over $100,000 by 65. That doesn't sound like wealth, and it isn't, but it is the difference between zero options and some options. It moves you off the cliff edge and onto solid ground, and solid ground is level 2. Level 2 is the level most Americans actually retire into, so pay close attention because statistically, this is probably the conversation about your own future. I call it the paycheck retirement because money still has to be managed almost like a working paycheck. It comes in, it gets allocated, and very little is left to float freely. In numbers, level 2 runs from roughly $70,000 of net worth up to around $400,000. That top figure matters because the median net worth for households in their late 60s and early 70s sits right around $410,000. The median, the exact middle of the country. So when you reach level 2, you are not behind the average American. In many cases, you are the average American. The trouble is that the average American's retirement is tighter than almost anyone expects it to be. Here is the thing that confuses people about level 2. That net worth figure is not a pile of spendable cash. For the typical level 2 household, the large majority of it is locked inside the home. The house is paid off or nearly paid off, and that equity is real wealth. But you cannot buy groceries with a hallway. The actual retirement account, the part that generates monthly income, is far smaller. The median retirement account balance for households 65 to 74 is closer to $200,000, and for many, it is well below that. So let's run the real math, because this is where level 2 becomes concrete. Financial planners use something called the 4% rule as a rough guide for how much you can pull from a portfolio each year without running out. Take a retirement account of $200,000. 4% of that is $8,000 a year. That's about $660 a month from a lifetime of saving. Add the average Social Security benefit of around $2,070, and the total monthly income lands somewhere near $2,700. Call it $32,000 a year to run an entire life. Picture a woman named Sandra. Sandra is 68. She spent her career as a dental office manager, raised 2 kids, and did almost everything right by the standards she was given. Her house is paid off, which is a genuine achievement and a real source of security. Her net worth, mostly that house, is around $300,000, placing her squarely in level 2. Sandra is not in crisis. She is not skipping medication. She can cover her bills, keep her home warm, and handle a small surprise without panic. But Sandra's retirement runs on a budget, with very little give. A big trip with her sister gets planned, then quietly postponed, then planned again. Helping a grandchild with college is something she wants to do and simply cannot, not at a level that would matter. When her roof needed work, she didn't have a crisis the way Ron did, but she did watch a meaningful chunk of her cushion disappear, and she felt the floor get a little thinner under her. Level 2 is comfortable enough to be grateful for and tight enough to think about constantly. It is a retirement that works as long as nothing goes seriously wrong. And something usually goes wrong. This is the quiet threat hanging over level 2, and it has a name: healthcare. According to Fidelity's most recent estimate, a single 65-year-old retiring today can expect to spend roughly $172,000 on healthcare across retirement. For a couple, that figure climbs to around $345,000. And that does not include long-term care, the assisted living, or in-home help that close to 70% of people over 65 will eventually need. For a level 2 household, healthcare alone can swallow most of the savings. The home equity stays, but the flexible money drains away faster than anyone planned for. So what separates level 2 from the levels above it? It is almost never income. 2 people can earn the exact same $55,000 for 35 years and retire on completely different levels. The first separator is automation. People who climb past level 2 set up automatic contributions early, so the money moved into investments before they ever saw it and ever had a chance to spend it. People who stay on level 2 usually relied on manual saving, the plan to transfer money whenever there was extra. There is rarely extra. The intention was real, and the transfer just never quite happened. The second separator is the savings rate itself. Comfortable retirees consistently put away around 15 to 20% of their income across their careers. Level 2 retirees typically saved 5% or less. In any single year, the gap between 5% and 15% feels small and manageable. Across 35 years of compounding, it is the difference between a few $100,000 and well over $1 million. The small gap and the giant gap are the same gap. You just don't see it until the end. Quick pause here, because if these breakdowns are useful to you, subscribing genuinely helps. This channel walks through the real numbers behind retirement and wealth every single week, the math nobody explained to Ron or Sandra in time for it to help them. If you want that math while it can still change your trajectory, this is the place. Now let's climb to the level where the air finally gets easier. Level 3. Level 3 is where retirement starts to feel the way people imagined it would feel. I call it the comfortable retirement, and it is the first level with genuine discretionary breathing room. Not luxury, breathing room. In numbers, level 3 runs from that median figure of around $410,000 of net worth up to roughly $1.9 million. That's a wide band, and it spans everyone from the solidly comfortable into the genuinely well-off. What unites the whole band is a single change in daily experience. On level 3, money stops being a source of constant low-level anxiety and starts being a tool you actually direct. Run the math and you can see why. A level 3 household with, say, $800,000 in invested assets can draw around $32,000 a year using the 4% rule. Layer Social Security on top of that, and total income climbs comfortably past $50,000, often well past it for a couple. Suddenly, the picture changes. There is room for travel that actually happens instead of getting postponed. There is room to help a grandchild without quietly wrecking the budget. When the roof needs work or the car dies, it is an annoyance, a line item, not a threat to the whole structure. Picture a couple, the Hendersons, both retired, mid-60s, with a paid-off home and around $900,000 in invested accounts. Neither one was ever a high earner. He was a regional sales rep. She worked in school administration. Their combined income in their best year was maybe $110,000, and for most of their careers, it was a good deal less than that. They are not wealthy by the standards of the financial press, but their retirement feels abundant compared to Sandra's. And the reason is not the size of the paychecks they used to earn. It is what they did with them. So here are the habits that build level 3. And I want you to notice how unglamorous they are. The first is early automation. The same separator we saw at level 2, just executed for real. The Hendersons set up automatic retirement contributions in their late 20s and simply never turned them off. The money was invested before it could become a dinner out or a slightly nicer car. They didn't save what was left after spending. They spent what was left after saving. That sentence is small. The 30-year result of that sentence is enormous. The second habit is hitting a serious savings rate and treating it as non-negotiable. The Hendersons climbed to around 15% of income and held it. In 2026, the system actually makes this more achievable than it used to be, if you use it. The annual 401k contribution limit is now $24,500. Once you turn 50, catch-up provisions push that ceiling to $32,500. And there is a newer, enhanced catch-up for people aged 60 to 63 that lifts the limit even higher to over $35,000 a year. These are not loopholes. They are doors. Most people walk right past them because nobody pointed at the door. The third habit, and this is the one that quietly does the heaviest lifting, is staying invested through fear. Comfortable retirees did not have special information. They had behavior. When the market crashed, and across a 35-year career it will crash several times, they did not sell. They did not move everything into cash because the headlines were frightening. They held diversified, low-cost index funds and let time do its work. Level 2 retirees, by contrast, very often made the opposite move. They sold during downturns, locking in losses, and they parked money in ultra-safe accounts earning 2 or 3% while inflation quietly outpaced it. Look at what that single difference does. Someone investing $400 a month for 35 years at a 3% return ends up with roughly $300,000. The same $400 a month in a diversified portfolio averaging closer to 8% ends up near $900,000. Same income, same monthly sacrifice, same employer. One person retires on level 2 and one retires on level 3. And the only variable that changed was how the money was invested and whether they had the nerve to leave it alone. Investment behavior is not a minor detail. It is one of the main characters in this entire story. There is one more habit defining level 3, and it's the least discussed. It is debt management on the way in. The Hendersons crossed into retirement owning their home outright and carrying no car payment and no credit card balance. That meant every dollar of their income was free to fund living, not free to fund a bank. Level 2 and Level 1 retirees very often arrive still carrying those payments, and a fixed retirement income with debt attached behaves like a smaller income. The Hendersons didn't just build assets, they eliminated the leaks. Now let's look at the level where the math stops being about survival entirely. Level 4. Level 4 is the top 10% of retirees, and reaching it changes the fundamental question of retirement. On the levels below, the question was always some version of, will the money last? On level 4, the money will last. The new question becomes, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? I call this the work optional tier because that is the precise gift it delivers. Work becomes a choice. In numbers, level 4 begins around $1.9 million of net worth and climbs from there. For households right at retirement age, the threshold into the top 10% runs closer to $3 million. Either way, you are now in rare company. Across the whole country, only about 1 in 10 households reaches retirement with this kind of wealth, and only roughly the same share ever become retirement millionaires at all. Here is what level 4 actually buys, and it is not what most people picture. It is not yachts. The real purchase is the disappearance of financial fear. A level 4 retiree can absorb a major medical event without it threatening their security. They can help their adult children with a down payment and not feel the floor move. They can leave a meaningful inheritance, set up education funds for grandchildren, and weather a brutal market downturn early in retirement without their whole plan collapsing. They have what the levels below simply do not have, which is margin. Deep, genuine margin. Now I need to correct the biggest myth about this level, because the myth is what stops people from aiming for it. Most people assume level 4 is populated by surgeons, corporate executives, and people who started successful companies. Some of it is, but a large share of level 4 retirees are people who would describe their careers as completely ordinary. Teachers, engineers, mid-level managers, small business owners who never got rich, just stayed steady. 2-income households where neither person was a star earner. Picture a man named James. James is 67 with a net worth around $2.4 million. People assume he must have had some big windfall. He didn't. James was a project manager at a construction firm. His wife was a nurse. Their household income was solidly upper middle, but it was never extraordinary, and it certainly never explained a $2.4 million outcome on its own. What explained it was 3 decades of behavior that looks almost boring when you write it down. So here is how level 4 actually gets built. Every habit from level 3 is still here. The early automation, the high savings rate, the discipline to stay invested. But level 4 adds 3 more. The first is a savings rate that goes beyond the standard. James and his wife did not stop at 15%. In their peak earning years, their 40s and 50s, when income rose and the kids' expenses started to fall away, they pushed their combined savings rate above 25%. They treated every raise not as a lifestyle upgrade, but as a chance to widen the gap between earning and spending. The second level 4 habit is refusing lifestyle creep. This one is invisible and decisive. As James's income climbed over 30 years, his lifestyle climbed far more slowly than his paycheck did. He drove paid-off cars for years past the point where he could have afforded new ones. He stayed in a perfectly good house instead of trading up every time the income allowed it. Lifestyle creep is the single most efficient way to earn a high income and still retire on level 2, and James simply refused to play. Every dollar of income he did not absorb into his lifestyle became a dollar of compounding wealth. The third habit is using every tax-advantaged account the system offers and using it fully. James and his wife maxed their 401ks. They used IRAs. Crucially, they used a health savings account, an HSA, which in 2026 lets a family set aside $8,750 a year with a structure so favorable that contributions, growth, and qualified medical withdrawals can all escape tax. Most people treat the HSA as a small spending account. James treated it as a stealth retirement account aimed directly at the healthcare bill we talked about earlier, the one that crushes level 2. He did not out-earn his neighbors. He outstructured them. Now let's look at the rarest level of all, where wealth stops being about a person and starts being about a bloodline. Level 5. Level 5 is the top 1% of American retirees. In numbers, we are talking about a household net worth around $13.7 million and beyond. This is the level that operates by genuinely different rules, and it is worth understanding, even though very few of us will reach it, because the logic of level 5 reveals something important about all the levels below it. First, what life looks like up here. A level 5 retiree has effectively unlimited financial choice for any normal definition of a life. The question of running out of money is simply gone. The wealth is large enough that it generates substantial income on its own while barely being touched. And so the focus shifts entirely. It is no longer about funding a retirement. It is about legacy, about impact, about what the money does after the person is gone. Many people on this level continue working well into their later years, but every bit of it is by choice. They run foundations, they mentor, they invest in other people's businesses. Not one of them is doing it to make rent. Here is the genuinely useful insight, the reason I included level 5 at all. The path to this level is not just a bigger version of the path to level 3. At some point, the engine changes completely. The levels below are built primarily by saving income, by taking a paycheck and routing a disciplined slice of it into investments. That works beautifully up through level 4. But it has a ceiling because your income has a ceiling and your lifespan has a ceiling. Level 5 is built by owning assets, not by saving wages. The people here own businesses, sometimes several. They own real estate that other people pay them rent on. They own large equity stakes that compound whether they show up to an office or not. Their wealth is not tied to their hours anymore. It is detached from their time entirely, which means it can grow on a scale and at a speed that a salary, however large, never can. And there is a second engine at level 5, one that runs constantly and silently in the background. It is the tax code. Wealth at this level is structured with deep intention. Income that arrives as long-term investment gains is treated very differently from income that arrives as a paycheck. Assets get held inside trusts and other structures, not to break any rules, but because the rules genuinely reward ownership and patience and penalize the simple act of earning and spending. The level 5 household is not necessarily smarter than the level 3 household. It is playing a different game on a different board, and it knew that board existed. I'm not telling you this so you'll feel you need $13 million. You don't, and that is not the point of this video. I'm telling you because the principle scales all the way down. Even a level 2 saver who buys a single index fund has, in a small way, started to own assets instead of only earning wages. The direction level 5 points in, away from trading time for money and toward owning things that grow on their own, is the correct direction at every level. The top 1% did not discover a secret. They just took the most ordinary financial principle there is, ownership, and ran it further than everyone else. So let's pull all 5 levels together, because the most valuable thing in this video is not any single level. It is the pattern that runs through all of them. Look back at the whole staircase. Level 1, living on the Social Security cliff with nothing underneath it. Level 2, the median retirement, comfortable enough to be grateful for and tight enough to fear. Level 3, the first real breathing room. Level 4, the work optional tier where money stops being a worry. Level 5, the generational tier where money outlives the owner. 5 completely different versions of the same chapter of life. Now here is the thread. At no point in any of this did income decide the outcome. We started with Dave and Mike, two men with the same job and the same paycheck who landed on opposite ends of this staircase. We saw two workers earning an identical $55,000 retire $1 million apart. We saw James reach level 4 on an upper middle income that on paper should never have produced $2.4 million. Income is the raw material. It is not the result. The result was always built by behavior. And the behaviors are not complicated, which is the genuinely hopeful part of this. Start early so compounding has decades instead of years. Automate it so the decision gets made once instead of fighting your willpower every single month. Push your savings rate toward 15% and beyond. Stay invested through the scary years instead of selling into fear. Refuse to let your lifestyle swallow every raise. Use the tax-advantaged accounts the system is openly offering you. Walk into retirement without consumer debt dragging on your income. That is the entire list. Not one item on it requires a high salary. Every single one requires a decision, repeated. Which means the real answer to the question in the title is this: you are not permanently headed for any one of these levels. Your level is not assigned to you. It is the running total of your current behavior, and a running total can be changed. The person watching this at 30 who adjusts course now has time to climb 2 or 3 levels. The person watching at 45 can absolutely move up. Even the person watching at 55 with less saved than they'd like can meaningfully change which level they land on. The median retiree did not choose to have $185,000. They chose a series of small daily behaviors, each one reasonable on its own, that quietly added up to that number. Different behaviors produce a different number. That is not a motivational slogan. It is just arithmetic. So now you can see the 5 levels clearly, you understand the habits that move a person up the staircase, and you understand that your trajectory is still in your hands. But there is a piece this video did not cover, and it is the piece that determines almost everything. Knowing the habits is not the same as keeping them, because at every single stage of life, there is a specific, predictable financial trap waiting, and each one is designed to knock a person down a level without them noticing it happened. The trap in your 20s that quietly steals your most valuable compounding years. The trap in your 30s that disguises lifestyle creep as success. The trap in your 40s that creates a brutal financial squeeze in the exact decade you needed to be building the most. The traps in your 50s and 60s that can undo decades of good work right at the finish line. Dave didn't end up below Mike because he didn't understand saving. He ended up there because he stepped into those traps one decade at a time and never saw the pattern. If you want to actually reach the level you're aiming for, the next thing to understand is the full map of those traps, age by age, so you can see each one coming before it costs you. I've broken every one of them down, every financial trap at every age, in another video on this channel. Honestly, that one is the place any real financial journey should start, because it is far easier to avoid the traps than to climb back up after one of them pulls you down. Watch that next. Then come back and decide which level you're building toward. I'll see you there.